Welcome YouTubers, how's everybody doing? Well, let's get right into it. We are going to be replacing the upper and lower ball joints on this 2002 TrailBlazer. This process will be from 2002 to 2009. All right, now here are my new upper and lower ball joints that I picked up on eBay, and I got them for free shipping. And I think I spent about $40, which is a pretty good deal. And if you look around, you can get these things even cheaper. But I have a tendency to stick with a little higher products that have a little more value and have a guarantee with them. But you can see here is the lower ball joint, and here is the upper ball joint. Now the upper ball joint is held on by this nut and bolt and a retaining ring. They even give you a little grease fitting there. Everything you need, so do your research when you go to buy these, and I think you can get a pretty good deal. If you want to buy OEM, upper and lower ball joints, you're going to pay a lot more, but still, I find that the aftermarkets work pretty good, especially on used vehicles, if you're not going to have the vehicle very long. But overall, make sure you do put grease in these, because when you do get them, they are pretty much bone dry, so the grease is the key. The more grease you have in them, the longer they will last. And I've had a lot of these aftermarket ball joints last quite some time without any issues, so it's really up to you. Alright, so the first thing here we have to do, we got to get this front wheel up in the air, and I'm going to be working on the passenger side first because this ball joint is pretty much trashed. The ball joint is completely gone. I made a video earlier on just how bad it is, so I decided to go ahead and do this side, so we'll get this side up in the air. Okay, now before we do that, one thing I would advise you to do is go ahead and take off some of your lug nuts. Leave a couple on. First of all, go ahead and get this big nut off. This is a 36mm nut. You can use a breaker bar or an impact wrench. I have an electric impact wrench. With this tire being on the ground, it will make that nut a lot easier to break free. So we'll do that first. Before I even do that, I have a can here that I go out, and I bought this at the local farm store, and I put all my used oil in it. And it makes it pretty nice to have, and we'll go ahead and oil this up a little bit. It'll just make this nut easier to come off once it breaks free. And now we'll go ahead and get this out of the way. And there it is. And now we'll go ahead and pull this wheel off. And this will be a great time to check your brake pads and also check your bearings and your hub. But we'll get to that a little bit later. And we'll just simply put this tire off to the side and we're ready to go to work. Now, how bad is my upper ball joint? Well, you tell me. Yep, that's why we're changing them. And now we can go ahead and turn our wheel to the right, and this way we'll have access into our caliper bolts. I always like to take a hammer and go in there and tap these a little bit to free up the rust, because you'd be surprised how much easier it is to get these off. You just tap them a little bit first. And next we'll take our socket. Now these are held on by a 17mm socket. Yes, I was thinking the same thing. I thought it would be an 18, but an 18 is way too big, so the 17 is what we will be using. And now we'll go ahead and break one of these loose, and you can see how easy that was by just tapping it a little bit, freeing up the dirt and rust. And we'll do the top one, and it's free. And now we'll just simply go ahead and take these out. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get these out. Now if you run into a problem where the entire bolt turns when you break this loose and this turns too, they make a 11/16 inch wrench you can stick right on here just like this. You can hold this, and this will allow you to go ahead and take this out. Sometimes these turn, sometimes they don't, but that's a pretty cool design, just so you know. Just having an extra wrench laying around just in case, and this was a 11/16 on this one. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pry off our caliper here. And we'll put this off to the side. A little bit later we will have to hang this up with a bungee cord on the spring. And now we're able to go ahead and pull off our brake pads. And like I said, this is a great time to check your brakes, and these are pretty much toast. A little wear marker indicators, it was right there. It is about ready to start squeaking. So the inside pad, well, people just don't believe in maintenance. I don't understand it. Would you drive around with a pad like that? I certainly wouldn't. So I caught this just in the nick of time, and you can see that wear mark indicator there is right down on the edge. So guess who's going to be buying new brake pads? Yep, me. Alright, let's go ahead and get the anti-rattle clips out of the way. And next we'll go ahead and take off this retainer bracket for the calipers, and this will be a 18mm socket. And on this you'll probably have to use a breaker bar and put a little bit of into it. And that's going to be a lot of so I'm going to have to go ahead and get another socket that is a 1/2 inch drive. Alright, so we're going to see how this Cobalt socket does. This is going to be a 1/2 inch drive, and this is giving me a fight. So let's see what we get here with this. I think you can still see that. Yeah, that was on there. All right, so got that one. I might as well watch me break the top one loose. I think you can still see that. Let me redo the camera. All right, I think you can still see that. So here we go. All right. All right, so we're rocking and rolling here. We'll get these out of the way and pull this retainer off. These are 18mm bolts, like I said. And there that comes. We'll put that off the side. And now we can go ahead and pull a rotor off. And as I roll along here, this job is costing me more and more as I go in the way of money. And you can see, yep, rotors not looking so good. So it looks like it's time to go ahead and get another set of rotors to put on here. So that'll be about another $40. Might as well do both sides. But at least we got all that off. All right, now I'd like to go ahead and get this plastic tab here, push this in with a pair of pliers. This is your ABS sensor wire. Go ahead and start getting this out of the way, because we all know if you break one of these, you're gonna have to work, and it's gonna cost you a couple dollars to get them fixed. So we push this tab out of the way, and we have a clip up on the top here. And on the front here, we can go ahead and pull this out of the little hole here, this little guy, and get this out of the way. All right, next thing we want to do is go ahead and get this ABS sensor out of the way. You can use a 3/16 inch Allen wrench here, or these guys here, or you can use a little guy like this. I like these. Sometimes they work better for me. This is a T30. This is a little star bit, and we'll go ahead and get this out. Now, before you do that, put the socket on there like this and kind of tap it, because it will free up that. These things sometimes can really stick pretty hard, and you can see it's coming off, which is great. All right, so out it comes. I had to take a pair of pinchers and kind of grab this a little bit, and it's still kind of stuck in there, so I'm gonna have to wiggle it some more and pull out on it, and there it comes. And yes, I think this is probably the wheel bearing that I have is bad. Matter of fact, we'll go ahead and test this wheel bearing real quick, and there is the bolt that I just took out, so you can see that. And there is a little shim that goes in behind that, just so you know. So I'm going to pull this out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and see. I probably won't be able to check this wheel bearing the way I want to until I pop this axle out, but it seems tight. But although, go ahead and stick some cloth in here so you don't get any dirt in there, and that way you can protect that for now. And on the back side of the knuckle here, we have to go ahead and take out these two 10mm bolts. They hold on the brake line going to the caliper. So once we get these out of the way, we can free up this line. Then really all we have to do is go ahead and break that top ball joint loose. All right, we'll just go ahead and get this out of the way. And there is that bracket I was telling you about. And now we can go ahead and hang up this caliper. Our caliper is kind of up in the air. You could probably set it down here on the bottom. It would probably be okay, but I'll go ahead and just get it out of the way for now. Now all we got to do is go ahead and unbolt that bolt on the top there, the nut and the bolt, and go ahead and take that off and tap that ball joint out of the knuckle. Okay, at this point we are moving right along, so now we're going to use a deep well socket, 15mm on this nut, and we'll take a 15 wrench and hold it, and we'll go ahead and get this off, and you can see how bad that ball joint is. The whole thing is bouncing around. Alright, so we just got that out, and I apologize for the jungle sounds. I live in a forest, folks. There are birds and crickets and you name it. Anything that makes a noise, it's an animal, it lives here. It's really hard to cut the gnat sound out a lot of times when I'm doing these videos. Alright, so we got that out. And I have this one bird that's always making a noise when I'm out here. I don't know if you can hear it or not. And a couple guys using chainsaws today. So yeah, a lot of activity in this neighborhood. Alright, so let's go ahead and knock this up. And usually it takes a little time. Now there is a place cut right here in this. You can take a chisel and spread this apart a little bit, and it'll make this easier to come out of this ball joint. Alright, so you don't have to do this, but it just makes it a little bit easier. A big chisel or a screwdriver, just kind of free that up a little bit, and this will help us pull that off. And ta-da! How about that? Okay, the next step is go ahead and put your nut back on the axle there and kind of hit this a couple times. And that way we can push that axle back. Alright, so we got all this out, and the reason I knocked this axle back a little bit is to give this a little more leeway to kind of swing out for now, and leave your nut on, because what we're going to do now is go ahead, there's a clip right there on the bottom of this ball joint. We need to go ahead and pop that out of there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and knock this clip out, and I got the camera between my knees, so we'll see how this works. Alright, there we go. It's coming out. And I think we got her there. And the reason we're going to do the ball joint, fix the ball joint first while this is all connected, is because if we take all this off and try to press this ball joint out, you really have to wrestle around with this. But with this still hooked up like this, this will give us some leverage for this to hang on to, especially when we're using that ball joint presser. It'll just make it a lot nicer. Then once we get this ball joint pressed in, then we'll go ahead and take the bottom ball joint off and pop the axle out and do the bottom. It just makes it a lot easier that way. So we'll go ahead and get this clip out of the way. Alright, there comes our clip. And now we're ready to go ahead and press that bad boy out. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and pull this ball joint out, press it out. But look at this. Can you imagine driving down the highway with that? That is just crazy. And this came from a dealer, and someone was driving it before they traded it in, so yeah. Now, in order to press this ball joint out, we have to use one of these guys here. You have to go to the parts store and rent one of these. If you have one, hey, good for you. This one here is about $220, but they will give you your money back when you bring it back. And you can see it's got all the pieces here. Now, if you get the smaller one, you can make it work, but here's the key. The smaller one, it will not have all these pieces. It'll have some, but what you have to do if you have a smaller one, you have to go back up here, and when you take your nut off, just go ahead and take a grinder and cut this out, and that way you can put a small socket on here and push this out. The problem is these are so long, these studs are so long, it's really hard to get something to go over this, and by the time you put your clamp up here with your ball joint and everything, there's not enough room, and this is why you really have to go out and get probably a big ball joint remover instead of the smaller one. You can see it has a lot more pieces here for me to work with. This will make your life a little bit easier, but it is not impossible to take that ball joint out, the upper one and lower one, with a smaller kit. If you have some extra sockets around, take a grinder and just cut this off, and that way you can get a socket over that. But you can see that socket won't go over that, and it makes more room here in order for that C-clamp to clamp that it doesn't have. So just cut this off and just stick it down there, and you can push this ball joint straight out. So let's go ahead and start on this. Alright, there is my setup. Now, even with this setup that I just figured there'd be enough pieces in there to work with, I still had to put a socket up here on top of this little adapter in order to push this ball joint straight down into this cup. So just be aware that these TrailBlazer ball joints are not for the lighthearted, but like I said, if you just cut that off and use a socket, you can push it right up. But I wanted to see if I can actually get this out, and that way, if you have this issue, this is how I set it up in order to get that out. So also make sure you go ahead and put a cloth over your fender so we don't damage that, because this may move around a little bit. And let's get busy here and push this ball joint out. Alright, so here we go. I'll try to hold it steady, and it should come out pretty easy, but not too bad once you get them going. And yep, it's going. And I think you can kind of see it there. And once it gets going, it goes pretty fast. And also, if you put a little grease around there, it will push it up pretty fast. And that was fast, my friend. You see how fast that came out? Wow. Alright, so that went pretty fast, and there's the old ball joint. So all we gotta do is clean this up a little bit and press the other one in. But you can see it was pretty bad. We'll go ahead and press the other one in. Here was my setup. I used this little adapter there to sit on top of that ball joint, and a little socket like that, and this will push it straight down. Okay, and as you can see, I got the top one started. Now you may have to play with this rubber boot a little bit to get it to go through there. And once it goes in there, you can see the bottom of it is ready to be pressed in. And we can go ahead and grab our tool and press it in. So, so far so good. And we can go ahead and press this in and hopefully start taking the bottom part of this off and working on the bottom. Okay, you can see I got this boot and the upper ball joint started into the knuckle, and you will have to play with these boots a little bit. You'll have to pull them up and kind of slide it up through there like that. But you can see the bottom of the ball joint there. It is ready to be pressed in. And here is my setup. You can see you got the big cup on the top there, and on the bottom I have a small cup pushing up on that ball joint and pushing it up into this cup here, so it should be pretty easy. Alright, so here we go. Let's go ahead and get this in. And it's slowly going. And I'll let the camera roll. You can watch me do this entire thing. It looks like it's all the way in. Now we'll go ahead and take this apart, and I'll try not to drop it like I did when the ball joint came out. And you can see there's a small tool that I've got on the bottom, this little guy here. And on the top, I simply have this guy. Once I get it off, that I'm using to push it in with right here. I think you can see that. This guy right here, this is what you want your ball joint to be pushed up into, and you can see the ball joint all the way in. So how about that? So all we gotta do is put our keeper here on, and now we have our snap ring on, and this ball joint is done. So how nice is that? Of course, you don't have to do this. You can take this whole unit off and go ahead and do that ball joint, but I like to do it while it's still on. It just gives me something to work with, some leverage here. Now we'll go ahead and just cover this up so we don't damage it, and go ahead and take the rest of this off and go ahead and knock that bottom one out. Okay, moving on. Now what we need to do is go ahead and take this nut off, this 18mm nut off the tie rod end. Get this off, and like I said, put a little grease on there. It does help to get this off. Alright, so we got that off. And now what we want to do is get a hammer and hit this really good. So we're going to go ahead and knock this loose. Now I'm using a small hammer. If this doesn't work, I may have to get my larger one. But in general, you can get those off. Now we need to go ahead and take off our bottom ball joint nut, which is right there. And there's a little keeper here. Get this guy out of the way. That off the side. Probably don't need it no more. And now we'll go ahead and use a 22mm socket and a breaker bar, ratchet, whatever you got. And I got a little oil in there to help out. So we'll get this off. And I'll probably have to put my little extension here. This will make life a lot easier. So get it as far as it'll go and pull on it until it breaks loose. Just like that. I know the video is going to be a little longer than normal than I would like for it to be, but I like to cover all the bases for you guys. But some guys don't show all this. Yeah, get it off there. Alright, so there, that is off. Now really all we have to do is take a hammer and hit this really good. Slide that axle out, and this whole unit will come off, and we can work on the bottom ball joint. Alright, so I got my hammer, and we'll hit it a couple times and see what we can get. If not, we may have to get the bigger hammer. Bigger hammer. Alright, so I got my big hammer here. It's not too big, but it's big enough. You could use a pickle fork and try to get that loose, but I find most of the time it's just as fast just to hit it. Okay, let's see what happens here. There we go. This is how bigger the hammer is. So sometimes this is all you need. Now all we got to do is slide that out, and you can kind of watch me here. I'll take this nut off. Get this out of the way. Once you get to this point, you got it made. And now slide it off. Ta-da! And there's our lower ball joint. Easy to get to. Now, since we got this off, make a quick note of this and make sure you do this. Check your wheel bearing. I've got a noise. I'm not sure where it's at. This is a good time to spin this and see. And there's my noise. Hey, it's not supposed to be making any noise. So that's bad. And actually, I've got one ordered. It should be here tomorrow. So this is great. But this is really bad. This should not be making any noise. There's no play in it. This is why I say a lot of times, in order to check a wheel bearing the right way, you have to pull the axle out a lot of times and actually do this, because that axle will not let you spin this like this. All right, moving on. So for the bottom ball joint, we're going to get this clip out of here, and once we get that out, we can go ahead and take off this little guy here. It's not going to be used, it's trashed. I just want to get this out of the way. All right, goodbye old grease fitting. No, actually it might be, it's no good, trashed. It's too rusted up. Okay guys, now something that'll save you some time, and I find it's pretty fast. This bottom control arm here, if it's supported fairly solid, you can take a hammer and start knocking this out. Now you can use a tool if you want, but I find it takes a lot of time to get this out. So let's go ahead and hit this a couple times and see if we can get this to move. Just take the smaller hammer and tap on it first, see if it moves. Actually, I think it's starting to move a little bit. I'm going to hit it a couple times with my bigger hammer. And I think it's going. I think you can see that by hitting it with my smaller hammer. It's slowly going. Just about flush. And I'm going to take my grinder and just kind of grind the edges off real quick. That way it won't be catching, and I should be able to knock the rest of that way out of there. Alright, you can see I got that cleaned up a little bit. I don't care what anybody says, the TrailBlazers are the hardest ball joints, especially the lower ones, to get out. And you can see that gap right there. So it is slowly going. Alright, so what I had to do is put my little jack stand here and hold this really solid, because I realized it was bouncing around. Now since we got it down about as far as I can hit it, I'm going to take a socket and put on top of it. Make sure you use a socket that you don't need or you've used before. Take my hammer and we'll just knock it out a couple times here, hit it, and you can see it's slowly going. Alright, so I got it as far as I'm going to get it. It doesn't want to go any further, so now I guess I'll go ahead and use the tool. But sometimes these come right out, but at least we got it started. Alright, so I got the tool in there, pretty simple setup, and I'm pushing on as hard as I can. And sometimes when it gets into a bind like this, take your socket back off and take your hammer and hit the top of this, and it'll knock it through. Because there's a lot of pressure build up here. See, it moved quite a bit that time, so you may have to do that 1 or 2 times before you get this completely out. So we'll keep pushing here. Looks like it's slowly coming out. Like I said, these bottom ones are hard to do. And there we go. Just about out. Ta-da! Alright, so there it is. It is a big ball joint, so have a little patience. Just remember, support your lower control arm, take a hammer and just start hitting it, and eventually you can get it out, then use your tool to press it the rest of the way out. So let's put the new ones in. Okay, so here is the new lower ball joint. So all we got to do now is go ahead and press this up in there, put it on the bottom like that, and we'll go ahead and set our tool up here, and we'll go ahead and start pushing this in. Okay, here's my setup. I've got the little cup on the top so the ball joint will get forced up into. And on the bottom I have a long cup that will be pushing on this ball joint upwards, and this should push it right on up into the bottom of this knuckle. So let's get to it. Okay, so here we go. And you can see it slowly going. It's always a good thing. And you can see it's slowly going. Now if it gets in a bind, take your hammer and tap the top of this a little bit. See how that moved? It'll straighten that up a little bit and help it go in. And you can see we're just about all the way up there. And she's all the way in, and we can put a wrap on that. All right, quickly, here's a look how I had this set up. It takes a while to get used to these tools, but once you do it a couple times, it works out pretty good. And that's how our setup is. Of course, the boot here popped off. I'll just slide this back on. But it looks like it's going to work out pretty good. Finally, we'll go ahead and get our keeper on, and we can call that a wrap. All we got to do is go ahead and put our little grease fitting on the top here and put some grease in it and put everything back together, and it'll be great. And we'll fill this baby up with some good grease, and she'll last quite a long time. So we are pretty much done on this side, so all we gotta do is start reassembling everything. Just do everything in reverse order, and we'll hit the other side. I'm not going to show you every step, but you get the idea, and we'll come back here and look at it when it's pretty much all back together. All right, YouTubers, we're looking at another day here. I had to stop last night because we had a horrible storm, but it is a new day, and I did get the driver's side done, and got the wheel back on. Now this side does have a bad wheel bearing. I'm going to be replacing it and doing a quick video on it. I'll show you a couple tricks here to get that wheel bearing off, because a lot of people get in trouble. But this is done. Upper and new lower ball joints are on this. Now the passenger side, it's done also. All I have to do, well, to me it's done. There's the new upper ball joint, and there's the new lower ball joint. All I have to do is bolt this spindle on and this whole unit. No big deal, easy to do, and button this side up and it's all done. So this video's gotten pretty long, so I figured I'd just go ahead and show you this. I'm not going to show you assembling all this back in. Very easy to do. Well, when you do this job, like I said earlier, the only problem you may have is trying to get this lower ball joint out, but you could try to use that ball joint clamp and tool and see if you can just get this to push out the first time. If it doesn't want to go, you may have to take the hammer and give it some persuasion. So I wanted to show you that. And also one final thing, the wheel bearing on this side is great, no problem whatsoever, makes no noise, doesn't have hardly too much resistance. But the other side you saw earlier is in pretty bad shape. So I'm going to be happy when we have new lower and upper ball joints, which is probably about I think it was about $650 for both of these if the shop did it. So saved quite a bit of money. So I'll have some more future videos later on this TrailBlazer as we listen to the morning birds sing out here. It's about 6 in the morning. I don't think the sun's even up yet. So until my next video, guys, thanks for watching. Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe and like and all that. Until my next video, guys, I will see you guys later.